All right. So last week we talked about unit testing, and as an assignment, you were asked to unit test a couple of algorithms, right? And but these algorithms were static algorithms, right? Well, algorithms in the sense that you could easily isolate them, right? You could easily provide the initial state, right, of what the values were, and then feed your algorithm with certain input values, and then verify that the algorithm was providing the right results that you were expecting, right? And that's fine, right? That's what we should try to do. All the algorithms, whatever code that you're testing, that you're executing, you should be able to isolate it, as much as possible, so that it's self-contained and it minimize any dependencies that you might have, right? You don't want to have to depend on being connected to the internet, or being able to connect it to the database, or the file system, or you need to be able to make sure that your source code can be tested individually, isolated from everything else. Even if it depends on a whole bunch of other things, right? We need to be able to test it all by itself. So it becomes somewhat challenging when we're testing a web layer, right? Because the web layer assumes that you have a server running, right? That you're connecting to this through HTTP, right? And it's responding HTTP, and maybe that web layer is making has additional dependencies, right? That it needs to connect to some database, right? It needs to go fetch and do a SQL query and an insert or delete or an update or whatnot, right? It needs to be able to convert that flat relational database into some Java representation, right? And give you that Java representation so that you can actually exercise the actual algorithm, right? So isolating your code is now fairly challenging, right? But nevertheless, we need to be able to isolate it, right? We need to be able to just focus on that little piece, right? And so that and try to exercise the code without having to go out to the database, without having to go out through a network. Okay, so we're going to cover that today, in particular because whenever you're going to do the code coverage testing this week, if you do the code coverage, you'll notice that none of your controllers are being executed. None of your repositories are being executed. Right, none of that. All that is in red, zero everywhere. Right, or maybe just the class is being executed, but none of the other functions are being executed. So we want to be able to execute them, right? But we want to isolate them, right, and remove the dependency that they need a server running, right, that they need a database server running, right? We're going to isolate it. So let's talk about the challenges and how we could get around those challenges for testing the web layer. So first of all, we'll need to add a couple dependencies. You might already have the Spring Boot Starter Web dependency in your POM file, but we'll need to add another dependency, which is a Spring Boot Starter Test. Right, so this is a dependency that we'll need so that so we're going to be able to annotate these tests with some annotations to tell it that we want to isolate the controller. We want to isolate the data source, right? So all that good stuff is in the Spring Boot Starter test, right? So you'll need to include that. You already probably have this plugin, this Maven plugin, so you're probably good there. You also probably have your application already configured correctly. It should have a Spring Boot application, and it should have a Spring application.run. This is implemented for you by default when you create a Spring Boot application. The main class, the main class that has the main function in there. This is what it should look like. So the testing framework assumes that you have that configured, and we do. You should already have that configured. Okay, so how do we test controllers? All right, so we'd like to be able to make sure that we can verify that controllers are up and running.